In this lesson, I want to give you guys a little bit more of an insights around Chinese business culture and a little bit of Chinese culture in general. Chances are your factory's probably going to be located in China, so it's beneficial to understand a little bit more about their culture and how it differs from typical American or what the rest of the Western world. To start off, I'll talk about a term called guangqi. You hear this referred to often when you're researching and learning about Chinese business culture, but in general, guangqi describes a relationship in business context, and I'd say like it's based on mutual trust and benefits. So in general, I'd say China has a history of kind of like scandals and bribery, maybe even what we think of as kind of like poor business ethics. And I think the result of that has been like this concept around guangqi, which if you think about it, it's kind of like a relationship that is built over time. All right. And there's a lot of aspects of guangqi, and I don't think there's like a direct translation to it in English, but I'd say like it's a combination of like trust that you build with people over time, the amount of respect that you show them and they show you, even spending time with them. And then something else that you'll see referred to commonly, which is like the concept of face. And I'd say a face is in general kind of like your public perception or maybe like your social role kind of. So let me give you some examples. And you'll hear face referred to as giving face or losing face. So when you give face, that kind of like elevates your elevates your amount of guangqi, like if it was measured, okay? So you give face when you do things like accept invitations, you give presents, you show lots of respect, maybe you have a level of knowledge of like the local customs, speaking in a more like formal or respectful way. These will be all examples of giving face, which overall kind of like elevates the kind of like the amount of guangqi or like the relationship that you're building with people. Some examples of losing face would be like just overall being disrespectful, maybe like insulting someone in public, refusing invitations or refusing gifts, losing your temper. Those would all be ways that like you lose face. Okay, so you'll hear some of those terms referred to about like face as well as guangqi, and yeah, that's a little bit of like the big picture overview of that. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what Chinese suppliers are looking for in a buyer, okay, and how this could potentially differ from the Western world or differ from how you kind of like think about it. So, big picture, when a Chinese supplier is looking for a buyer, they're kind of vetting you just like you're vetting them. So they want to know that this is going to be a buyer that's fairly easy to work with, probably easy to communicate with, probably has a certain level of knowledge about the product. They want to believe that there's a likelihood of this being a long-lasting relationship and someone who places reorders. Once you form the relationship, there's going to be other things like if you have on-time payments, probably like if you visit them or visit their factory. These will all be things that they are kind of like looking for in like the level of trust or guangqi that they have with one of their customers. So something that can help you with that is to like spend a level of time building trust with them. So like tell them a little bit more about yourself, tell them, this is like after kind of like the initial vetting process, but like tell them a little bit about yourself, like build trust with them, tell them a little bit more about your family. After you've been working with them for a while, I'd recommend going to visit their factory. And overall, those are going to help you with like your overall business relationship. So then as a result, maybe they give you better pricing or they are just like get back to you faster. They're easier to communicate with as a result. All those different things would come into account there. Now, I also want to give you, I was trying to think about like, okay, like the first time that I went to China, I don't think I did too much research on kind of like business culture as a whole. If you do choose to make a trip there, I would recommend doing a certain level of research about kind of like Chinese business culture. But I wanted to give you guys some like the basics to just kind of dip your toes in it, as well as have a little bit more of an understanding when you're communicating with your factories. All right. So some differences that I've seen is, one, I'd say like no is not a common answer. Just like straight out coming out and just saying like no, like being that direct. Instead, you'll hear things like, let me check on that, or we'll think about it, or, like anything along those lines that's more of like a, I don't know type thing. That's usually a no. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think some of the other things that when I first started dealing with Chinese business in general is the business ethics and laws associated with IP are just different in China. So an example of this is historically there hasn't been really any like patent protection in China. And they've kind of like been built culturally for a long period of time on just like copying other things. And they say this stems back all the way from like when they're learning to write, they do so by like copying symbols. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I've kind of like read in the past. So the result of this is oftentimes like you'll see pictures of products on like Alibaba or on their website that aren't even the products they made, or aren't even the products that they that they've just made in the past. Okay. So my first assumption was like, man, that's kind of unethical. They're like, they stole these other person's photos and they're putting them on their websites to kind of claim that their own. But like for them, it's not even something that's really necessarily like unethical. On kind of like those same tokens, I've like been to trade shows and there'll be like products that are being showcased in their area and they haven't even made those products. And like what they'll kind of say is like, oh, well, we can make this, or like right away you just assume that they did make that, but it's not necessarily the case. So I do recommend, like, for example, you ask like, have you made this? Do you currently manufacture this? Like just some questions like that will help you kind of get to the bottom of that often. So I guess the gist of that overall is like, don't always believe what you see immediately. Instead, kind of like really dig into these different areas. Some of the other things is about just kind of like general business practices that I remember like really stood out to me. Like one, business card culture. So when you're over there, you're meeting people, you'll always see them hand their business card to you with two hands, and it's respectful to take it from them with two hands. That's them saying like, I want to communicate with you, like I trust you. Here's like kind of like who I am, and you want to like show respect from that and like take it with two hands, take the time to go ahead and read it. And then it's also nice to put it in like a little business card holder or something instead of just like shove it in your pocket, or I don't know. Some of the other things that stood out for me that I remember is when you do go there, food and inviting you to breakfast, tea, lunch, dinner, that's all like a very popular thing. And there'll be lots of this, and they'll try to feed you lots of food and lots of alcohol. One thing I didn't realize I remember is that if you like eat all the food off your plate or you drink all of your drink, they're always going to continue to refill it, because it would be kind of like rude of them to let you leave without having enough to like eat or drink. So like I remember, like growing up in America, it's respectful to kind of like eat all your food. Whereas there, like if you eat all your food, they're just going to keep on refilling it. So instead, it's common to leave food on your plate. Another little thing with that is whoever sets up the meal or invites people, it's common for you, or it'd be typical and respectful for you to pay for the meal. And it's also, you also try not to kind of like pay in front of other people or show any payment in front of your guests. So those are a few of just kind of like remember the big things that kind of stood out with me the first time I started communicating with companies in China, as well as went there to visit. Overall, it's a very welcoming and nice group of people. Overall, it's becoming more common for them to like understand like Western values or Western culture as well. Just kind of with the invention of the internet and the globalization, of course, in the entire world. So you don't have to stress out about it too much. Most of them, they see you do things that would be like disrespectful in their culture. A lot of them understand that it's a little bit different, kind of like in America or the Western world. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. But if you do decide to go over there to visit, at least, I would recommend reading up on this subject a little bit more. You can also see the other lesson that I did around trade shows in China. And that's all there is to it as far as a big picture overview. I think from this, you have enough of an understanding to be like communicating with factories you find on Alibaba or whatever else. And like I said, if you choose to make a trip over there, I think it's worth some additional reading on it.